evening, America. You are about to meet Sergeant Dave, host of the Remember the Fallen show. After having survived a rollover accident avoiding a landmine in a troop transport vehicle, military acronym LMTV, in the Parwan province of Afghanistan in 2004, he emerges and returns to the United States with an even more compelling tale of perseverance as he navigates the rapids of the troubled VA system. He gains a new perspective with a fever of enthusiasm to all patriots across the windswept fields of America.
Okay, here we are live podcast at Seminole County, USA on the Winter Springs and Oviedo line, and today's episode is going to be podcast is going to be a little bit different. We're going to send our respect and honor to one of the greatest patriots. President George H.W. Bush is getting a national farewell at Washington National Cathedral before family and friends, presidents, and foreign dignitaries. The nation's 41st president died Friday in Houston at age 94. His wife of 73 years, Barbara, passed away in April. Bush's casket and the family will arrive at the cathedral just before 11 Eastern Time Wednesday, which is today when the service is expected to begin. Bush had been lying in state in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda since Monday, with a river of mourners passing through around the clock. The viewing came to a close at 7 a.m. Wednesday morning. Who will speak? 4 men are expected to deliver eulogies. The late president's son, George W. Bush, also a former president, former Canadian Prime Minister Brian Mulroney, who held the post while the elder Bush was president, former Senator Alan Simpson, Republican for Wyoming, who has known the Bush family since the 1960s, and historian John Meacham, who wrote a Bush biography. All eyes will be on the road directly in front of the pulpit. That's where President Donald Trump and his wife Melania are expected to sit along with the remaining former presidents and their families. George W. Bush, Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and his wife. Trump's 2016 Democratic rival Hillary Clinton, which is Clinton's wife, right? Trump has had strained relations at best with all of them. But since Bush's death, Trump has extended traditional courtesies to the Bush family, including allowing them to stay at the presidential guest house and visiting with them there. Also attending, Britain's Prince Charles, the King and Queen of Jordan, Polish President Andrzej Duda, and other dignitaries from around the world. Look, too, for some of the gray bears from the late president's administration. Look for much discussion of Bush's legacy of decency, humor, and a determination to avoid referring to himself with the pronoun I. That last habit alone, instilled in Bush by his mother, sets up a contrast with Trump that no one has to mention out loud. Likely no one will, in keeping the Bush family's reported wish that the nation mourn their patriarch without the drama of such distractions. But Meacham wrote on an op-ed for the New York Times this week about Bush that ended with a hard-to-mistake reference. The nation mourns him not least because we no longer have a president who knows that the story of the nation is not all about him, Meacham wrote. Bush in the cathedral. The late president played an important role in the history of the cathedral chartered by Congress in 1893. On September 29, 1907, President Theodore Roosevelt laid the foundation stone. Exactly 83 years later, Bush was there when the final stone was laid in place. Bush said at the time, "We have constructed here this symbol of our nation's spiritual life, overlooking the center of our nation's secular life, a symbol which combines the permanence of stone and God, both of which will outlast men and memories." Bush is the 4th president to have his state funeral at the site, according to the cathedral. The others were Dwight D. Eisenhower, Ronald Reagan, Gerald Ford. 7 other presidents had memorial services there as well. Here are some known facts about state funerals. For U.S. presidents, there's a whole list of customs protocols and military honors that influence a national farewell. But much of the affair is subject to the family's wishes. The president's survivors are entitled to a military escort for the immediate family, for example, until the remains are buried. A 9-person team that carries the casket is another option, and a flag-draped casket is an honor afforded military veterans. And the president, as commander-in-chief, was a veteran of World War II, and yes, I do see his casket is draped by an American. Please, everybody in the audience, rise and remove your cap while President George H.W. Bush's casket is leaving the Washington Rotunda to have an outside ceremony. The casket is now moving slowly down the Capitol stairs. There are a total of 9 pallbearers carrying the casket. And now they're down from the stairs. They're walking up to the ceremony site. And the honor guard is going at the same pace. As the casket is being put into the limousine in front of thousands of people.
apologizes another president, and it's his father.
Yeah, what about this moment, and particularly that eulogy? For 43, he's obviously been working on it for quite some time. Obviously, they knew this day would come. Talk about that and his thought process.
Well, I talked to him Saturday, and he has been working on it for a while, and he's done it alone. He said, I don't want a speechwriter. I want this to be the expression of my heart about my father. And so I'm looking forward to it today. I think it'll be intensely personal.
In his inaugural address, the 41st President of the United States said this: "We cannot hope only to leave our children a bigger car, a bigger bank account. We must hope to give them a sense of what it means to be a loyal friend, a loving parent, a citizen who leaves his home, his neighborhood, and town better than he found it. What do we want the men and women who work with us to say when we are no longer there? That we were more driven to succeed than anyone around us, or that we stopped to ask if a sick child had gotten better and stayed a moment there to trade a word of friendship. Well, Dad, we're going to remember you for exactly that and much more. And we're going to miss you. Your decency, sincerity, and kind soul will stay with us forever. So through our tears, let us know the blessings of knowing and loving you, a great and noble man, the best father a son or daughter could have. And in our grief, let us smile knowing that Dad is hugging Robin and holding Mom's hand again."
Now we will hear historian John Meacham read aloud letters sent between former President George H.W. Bush and his wife Barbara Bush at the funeral of the 41st president.
He had the most wonderful of allies in Barbara Pierce Bush, his wife of 73 years. He called her Bar, the Silver Fox, and, when the situation warranted, the Enforcer. He was the only boy she ever kissed. Her children, Mrs. Bush liked to say, always wanted to throw up when they heard that. In a letter to Barbara during the war, young George H.W. Bush had written, "I love you, precious, with all my heart, and to know that you love me means my life. How lucky our children will be to have a mother like you." And as they will tell you, they surely were.
Next is the grandson of George H.W. Bush, which is Jeb Bush's son, speaks on his remembering his grandfather.
And that one of your grandfather's wishes was for President Trump to be at the funeral. And that, in fact, your family reached out to the White House months ago, knowing that that day may come soon. Can you tell us the backstory of why that truce, as it's been called, was important?
Well, I think if there's anybody that spoke to bipartisanship and rising above the politics of today, that would be my grandfather. And whether it's him or his staff, I know, and my grandmother, they all wanted all current occupants to be a part of this process and to take advantage of this time where we can put politics aside and focus on the greatness of our country and devotion to causes greater than ourselves. And my grandfather reflected that in his service. And I think, with President Trump's devotion of time to my grandfather's legacy, I hope reflects that, and Congress did yesterday. So it's important for the country to take this time and to reflect on the commonalities that we have rather than the differences.
And your whole family is on board with this. Obviously, your father ran against him for president in 2016 and was on the receiving end of a lot from then-candidate Trump.
Totally. I happen to be part of that team.
Yeah.
And it was tough. But, if my grandfather were here, he'd say during his many campaigns where he had tough campaigns against Lloyd Bentsen and other famous Democrats, fellow Republicans, Ronald Reagan, and others, is that, there's a time for politics and there's a time for governing. But there's also a time for reflection. And this is a time for reflection for our country to think about the values that make our country great.
Do you forgive President Trump? for those attacks on your father?
I'm not going to lie that, it hurts, it stings. But, my grandfather, my uncle, and my dad, if they taught me anything on politics, you get back up and you fight again. And so, I'm focused on my job in Texas. I know my dad is enjoying private life, but there's other ways to serve, and that's what my grandfather was all about, is that you don't have to be in elected politics to make a change. You can be in a nonprofit organization. You can serve your fellow man in a variety of other ways.
This day, we honor our 41st President, George H.W. Bush.
Here lies a great man. To the Bush family, we are profoundly sorry for your loss, and we are honored to celebrate this wonderful life with you.
Lord, we're grateful for the privilege you gave us to learn and grow from his integrity, civility, and spirituality.
A principled leader who knew America not only guards our own future, but also safeguards democracy for the world.
We thank you for sharing this special man with our nation and the world. In all of his 94 years, President Bush never lost his love of adventure, and he never failed to answer the call to serve his country.
Today, this hero has returned to the Capitol a final time.
Dear Lord, thank you for inspiring such greatness in President George H.W. Bush, and continue to bless the United States of America.
Next speaking is Vice President Mike Pence, remembers former President George H.W. Bush during a state funeral service in the U.S. Capitol Rotunda.
I was lucky enough to meet him in 1988 when he was vice president, and I was a 29-year-old just getting started in politics. Then, as always, I was struck by his approachability. There was a kindness about the man that was evident to everyone who ever met him. All his years in public service were characterized by kindness, modesty, and patriotism. He was so modest, in fact, that he never wrote an autobiography. But he did leave a record of his life in the thousands of letters that he wrote. I'm told that he started writing letters to his parents when he was 18 years old. And over time, his circle of correspondence grew to include family, friends, advisors, staff, business associates, former presidents, and just about anyone who would take the trouble to write to him. After a lifetime of writing letters, my son got one just not too long ago. As I told two of his sons this weekend, when our son made his first tailhook landing as a Marine aviator on the USS George Herbert Walker Bush, I took the liberty of writing the ship's namesake to ask for a small favor. I didn't write him as a vice president to a former president. I just wrote as a proud dad of a Marine aviator to a former Navy pilot. I asked him to sign a picture of the flight deck that I could give to my son. Now, we were told by the staff that the president had long since ended the practice of signing autographs, and we understood that. But little to my surprise, just in time for my son's winging, there came not only a signed photograph, but, of course, a letter, hand-signed as well, August 2018. In that letter, President Bush wrote to my son, in his words, "Congratulations on receiving your wings of gold. I know how proud you and your family are at this moment." And then, in words that assured us that the letter came directly from him, he wrote, quote, "Though we have not met, I share the pride your father has for you during this momentous occasion, and I wish you many CAVU days ahead. All the best, G. Bush."
In a 2009 speech, George H.W. Bush said that Bill Clinton was not his enemy, but as his friend. Here it is.
President Clinton beat me like a drum back in 1992, and then we became friends. And some of his friends look at him and they say, "Have you lost it with this crazy guy?" And some of mine look at it and they say, "It's just the same thing. What are you doing with Clinton?" And just because you run against someone does not mean you have to be enemies. Politics does not have to be mean and ugly. So it's now my privilege to introduce my colleague and friend, and I mean that, the 42nd President of the United States, President Bill Clinton. Great. Good to see you, pal.
We are a team. We're a united country, and when the going gets tough, we get moving.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
This historic act is the world's first comprehensive declaration of equality for people with disabilities.
5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined. Kuwait is liberated. Iraq's army is defeated. Our military objectives are met.
Over the arc of his life, President Bush has served our nation as a tremendous force for good, and we proudly salute him for his unwavering devotion to our country and our world.
A segment on George H.W. Bush's final last words.
Is that he really had a rough final week. As we know, Wolf, he's been suffering from Parkinson's, and he had congestive heart failure. And the last week, he really was suffering, and the family was told that it was nearing the end. They were very concerned it could be any day, but yesterday, when he woke up in the morning, they said to him, what do you want to do? He had said before that he didn't want to go back to the hospital. And he confirmed that. And he said for the first time, I'm ready to go. And he also told them, I want to go be with Barbara and Robin. Robin being their 3-year-old daughter who died of leukemia so many years ago. In addition, we have just learned about his final words, and they were in a phone call with his son, former President George W. Bush. He had been surrounded by his family, by his son Neil Bush, his wife Maria, his best friend James Baker, his grandson Pierce Bush, but he was on a phone call with his son, former President Bush, as we call him, 43. They were speaking on a speakerphone, and former President Bush, 43, said to his dad, you have been a wonderful father. And his father said his final words, which were, I love you too. And then shortly after, he passed away. So, just another very poignant moment, as expected as this was, because of his age and his health, Wolf. It's just sort of a heartbreaking glimpse inside what the family has been going through.
I was a fortunate soldier to serve under George H.W. Bush, 41st President of the United States. He'll be long remembered as a president and patriot. And for tonight's morning of our president, the government was closed today, so we will not do any sponsorship commercials in honor of our president, 41st President, George H.W. Bush.
Well, it's getting
.30 for the show, and I'm just about ready to go into rack ops mode. But before I relax, never one last promo. So go to SergeantDaveMatthews@gmail.com. That is SGTDaveMatthews@gmail.com for suggestions for the show's content. Or if you know a good advocate like to come speak on the show, you can email me as well. Once again, SergeantDaveMatthews@gmail.com. Remember, that's 2 T's in Matthews. Or you can go to my Facebook page and like the page at Remember the Fallen, all one word. Or you can also hit me on my Twitter handle at Heroic Memorials. Or if you're not into the Twitter bird chirping thing, you can go to my website at www.neverforgottenmemorials.org and mark your calendar every Thursday night on your phone at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at KLRNRadio.com. And you can also go to iHeartRadio.com, pull up search, go to podcast, and hit search again, and type in Remember the Fallen Show. You'll see all my archive shows there as well. Okay. Every Thursday night, that's in order until all the troops come home. All right, fall out. Pop Smoke out.